Today I wanted to talk about one of the most underrated and most underused stock plugins within FL Studio when it comes to mixing beats or songs. So let's hop right in and get to it. All right, so this is the Fruity Sim plugin. It's a stock plugin that comes with FL Studio. It doesn't look very complicated, and that's because it's not complicated. It's very easy to use, but it's very powerful whenever it comes to mixing within FL Studio. Basically what this plugin lets you do is it allows you to send out a copy of your audio signal pre-volume fader. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, in this example for this video, I have a kick drum loaded to mixer track number 1, and then I have a snare drum loaded to mixer track number 2. And you'll see that both of these mixer tracks are outputted and routed over here to the master channel as represented by this green wire at the bottom of each mixer track. Now, this routing that's taking place right here going to the master channel is taking place after the volume fader. So any adjustments made to this volume fader is going to affect the output of this mixer track going out to the master channel. Now, this also means that the mute button is going to affect the audio signal as well as the panning and also any plugins that are loaded here in the plugin slots. So this can present issues to us whenever we are trying to send out a copy of our audio signal to another mixer track within the mixer. So for example, if we wanted to add some reverb to the snare, what I would typically do is I would grab another mixer track, so mixer track number 3, and let's rename this reverb. Then I would load a reverb plugin on this mixer track, so we will go ahead and load the LX plate reverb. Then I would just come over here to the snares mixer track and I would send out a copy of the snare over here to the reverbs mixer track by selecting the arrow at the bottom of the reverbs mixer track. So now we have a copy being sent to the master channel, so that would be our original snare sound. And then we have a copy of the snare sound being sent over here to mixer track number 3, where the reverb plugin is loaded. So now we could press play and kind of dial in how much reverb we want by using the volume fader right here on the reverbs mixer channel. Now, having the reverb over here separate from the snare itself allows us to also add any type of plugins we want to only the reverb itself without it affecting the original snare sound. Now, there is one problem that's going to occur whenever you have it set up like this. So whenever we press play again, if I wanted to solo the reverb and only hear the reverb by itself, I'm not going to be able to hear it because if I mute the snare sound, then I'm going to lose that output right here that's going over here to the reverb. So I won't be able to hear the reverb by itself. I will only be able to hear it if I unmute the snare and have it playing alongside the reverb. So as you could see and hear, whenever that snare drum was muted, we weren't getting any output going over to the reverb, so we couldn't hear anything going on within the reverbs mixer channel. So in order to combat this issue, what you want to do is utilize the Fruity Sim plugin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this knob right here, and instead of sending, a full amount of audio signal over here to the reverbs mixer channel, what I'll instead do is I'll grab this knob and take it to 0%. So I'm not actually outputting any volume from the snare over here to the reverbs mixer channel. I just have it linked right here. So we have a copy of the snare drum being sent to the master channel that you can actually hear. And then we just have this wire right here that's linking the snare drum over here to the reverbs mixer track. So now what we can do is come over here to the snare and we can load the Fruity Sim plugin here in the plugin rack. Now I can right click here in the red box that says send to, and I'm going to select the reverb. Now, something to mention is that right here in the drop-down list, it's only going to show the tracks that you have linked to the snare drum. So you can see down here in the bottom, I do have the master channel right here with the green wire, and then I have a green wire going over here to the reverbs mixer track. So those are the only two options that should show up here in the drop-down menu. So now whenever I press play, I should be able to solo the reverb by itself and still hear what's going on while the snare drum is muted, right? So let's go ahead and just make sure this is all set up correctly. Okay, so as you saw and heard, the Fruity Sim plugin solved our issue. We are now able to hear what's going on the reverbs channel by itself without having to hear it in conjunction with the snare drum. So this is going to be very useful to us whenever we're mixing within FL Studio, because we're constantly going to be wanting to send copies of our audio signal to different mixer tracks, whether that be for parallel compression, parallel distortion, utilizing syntracks like reverbs and delays. Like, you're always going to want to be sending something out to multiple mixer tracks. And so I found that the Fruity Sim plugin allows you to do this in the most efficient way. Now, something worth pointing out is that wherever you have this Fruity Sim plugin loaded within your plugin chain, that is where the copy of the audio signal is going to be sent out from. So for example, if I have the Fruity Sim plugin loaded in slot number 3, any plugin that's loaded in slot number 1 and slot number 2, those are going to affect the audio signal that's being sent out. But any plugin that's loaded in slot number 4 and after, those will not affect the copy of the audio signal that's being sent out. Those will only affect the audio that's passing through the snares mixer track and going towards the master channel. So you really want to be aware of where you have this Fruity Sim plugin loaded and how you're sending it out to the other mixer track. So if you had some EQ and some compression loaded before the Fruity Sim plugin, and you didn't want those to actually be processing the copy of the audio signal that's being sent out to your parallel track, what you could do is just load the Fruity Sim plugin before those plugins, and that way that copy is being sent out before it hits the EQ and compression. Now, it's also worth mentioning here on the Fruity Sim plugin itself, you have a volume knob, a pan knob, and a wet dry knob. These can help you further process the sound that you're sending out as a copy of the audio to another mixer track. So you just have more control here. Typically, I don't even mess with these. I just, utilize the plugin to basically select where I want to send the copy of the audio signal to. Now, there's obviously a couple of different ways you could use this plugin, but for me, this is typically how I'm gonna utilize it within a mix. Like whenever I'm doing a reverb send track, or whenever I'm adding some delay on a send track, or even when I'm adding stuff in parallel, like some parallel distortion on a kick drum or some parallel compression, I want to be sending out that copy of the audio signal utilizing the Fruity Sim plugin, so that way I can basically solo out my parallel track and only hear what's going on that specific mixer track whenever I'm dialing in and adding some processing. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.